What if the exhaustion you feel at work isn't about the workload, but about that constant effort of managing how you are perceived? In today's episode, we're talking about something that often goes unspoken, what it means to grow professionally in spaces that weren't designed with you in mind. If you've ever felt like you had to carefully manage your tone, your presence, or your reactions, worried about being seen as too much or not enough at the same time, or questioned whether you can truly be yourself and succeed, this episode is for you. Because this isn't about confidence, it's about identity, power, and development inside real world systems.
Before we dive in, if you've ever felt like you're navigating invisible rules at work, you're not alone. Follow us on Facebook at Communication Skills for Working Women, or share this episode with someone who needs language for this experience, and leave a review. It helps more women find this conversation because you don't need to shrink to succeed. You need the tools to navigate and define your space.
Welcome to Communication Skills for Working Women. I'm Elizabeth.
And I'm Rose May. Do you find yourself second guessing or avoiding conversations because you're worried about being misunderstood?
You're not alone. On this show, we're sharing tangible tools for assertiveness, emotional resilience, and real life communication wins and fails.
Let's sharpen our communication together.
So, Rose, you have a story to share with us about this. I am
I,
very interested in hearing about this.
yeah, and as I'm thinking about this story, I'm also thinking about a conversation I literally had like 3 days ago with another woman who works predominantly with males and who works predominantly with men, and she is struggling. But anyways, we'll talk about this person first. So this is a woman that I worked with. We'll call her Danielle. Danielle is very smart, very thoughtful. She's sharp. She's committed to her work. But she described her workday in a way that I think resonates with many women. She said, I feel like I'm constantly calculating how I'm coming across, and not just what she was saying, but how it might be interpreted. So if she was direct, she worried she'd be seen as aggressive. If she was warm and expressive, she was worried she wouldn't be taken seriously. And this actually overlaps with a conversation that I had like briefly in passing with someone else, with this other person that I was just talking about. If she spoke up often, she didn't want to be labeled as too much. If she held back, she felt invisible. Or what made this even more complex was that these weren't just internal fears, these were patterns that she had seen. So she had watched other Black women be interrupted, overlooked, or mischaracterized in ways that others weren't. And so she learned to adapt. She paid close attention to the room, she rehearsed before meetings, she adjusted her tone, her expressions, her delivery. And on the outside, it worked and sounds like great plan, but because she was seen as professional, right? She was seen as reliable, composed, but the internal conflict and tension left her feeling exhausted because every day felt like a performance for her. And that does sound exhausting when you're
Yeah.
constantly calculating every micro expression, every word, every phrase, every nonverbal expression. That's exhausting.
It is exhausting. And I just want to say, like, we all do this on a certain level in navigating the world, right? And women of color, like, it's a different experience for you than it is for me. And I
Yeah.
think it's really important to like recognize the commonality. Like I can build some compassion because I have a level of experience with this.
Yeah.
And I don't understand because there's a level of experience that I do not have. There's privilege in areas that I don't have to navigate those things.
Hmm.
And so it's important to like gain understanding through the little bits and pieces that we do together and step back and say, I don't understand this. Tell me more. So
Hmm.
continue. Tell me more, Rose.
Yeah. Yeah. She just, in her experience, she said, I don't actually know which version of me is me anymore. And that's where we paused. And that's the moment we need to pause on because it's not just about confidence, right? She's a very capable, confident individual. This is about navigating identity in a system with unspoken rules about who gets to show up freely and who doesn't. And it's interesting that you're saying this. I'm thinking about this particular client, and I'm thinking about myself, and I'm thinking about this woman that I spoke to a couple days ago, and she's white in an all white male environment. And there's a lot of overlap. And I would say that there are ways that she feels like she is not able to show up freely as well. And it's different, right? And so this is just interesting because this is adult development from so many different angles. And it's not just about growing skills, but it's trying to make meaning out of these competing expectations. Be authentic, but not too authentic. Be confident, but not intimidating. Be yourself, but still fit in. And the real question really becomes like, is there space for me at all in
Mhm.
this area? Like how do I create a space where I can be authentic, you know?
And have we created a space where we really know what our authentic self is?
Absolutely.
Like that's a whole nother conversation that we're not going to get into today, but I
Yeah.
do think that that is really important to consider when we think about these things. Like, have I actually stepped back and taken time to figure out how, like, not how do I want to show up authentically, but like, who am I authentically? So
Right. Right. And I don't know. I guess part of this is, oh, this is so complex because she's a young professional, and by young, I mean younger than me, so like 20s, right? She's a young professional, and so she's navigating just regular adult development, but not just regular adult development. She's learning how to navigate it inside of a racialized system. And so there's the importance of recognizing that we have like this internal development, but there's an external reality that exists that is somewhat out of our control, and we have to figure out like how to grow in that space. It's so complicated.
it really, it really is very complicated. So let's consider a few things. One thing to consider is what workplace norms am I navigating? So when we pause, you talked about having that pause. That pause is so important. And then moving into curiosity and questions help us build curiosity. So here are some questions you can ask yourself. What does professionalism look like here? And that here is important because it's going to look different in different spaces. What does professionalism look like here? Who gets to define what that is?
Mm.
And that's important to consider too, because workplace norms reflect dominant cultural standards,
Oh, for sure.
right? Like around the tone and communication and emotional expression. I don't think I've been in a professional environment that it's been the same anywhere, whether
You know,
I'm the employee or a customer, like it's different everywhere you go.
yeah, I'm thinking about this experience that and I've talked about this in previous episodes, but of being in different, even like there are therapist cultures, where some are much more stoic in their
Mhm.
presentation and in their sessions with counseling and therapy. And then I was talking to a friend who has a black therapist, and he's like, I love my black therapist. I love my black therapist because he's expressive. Because when I think that I'm going crazy and his reactions mirror my feelings or my reactions, then it feels validating. And I feel like I'm not going crazy. Oh, something really is wrong here because someone else is responding in this way. And so even just thinking about like, how again like how the dominant culture impacts the way that you show up. If I was at that practice, I would feel a lot more comfortable showing up the way that I show up versus, kind of where I am right now, where I do feel like that has to be monitored a little bit. um and I think, yeah, so just yes, the dominant cultural standards really impact how people show up.
Yeah. And phrasing our questions in different ways is also really helpful. Like asking, which we may often say, like, what's wrong with me? From
Hmm.
changing that question to, okay, what system am I operating in? Like,
Hmm.
what things are out of my control, but that I can be aware of? Because being aware is huge, and then you can make adjustments. Like either adjust yourself, leave the system, go somewhere else. Like when you get curious, when you pause and can get curious, you just have a lot more options in front of you. And it often just reduces your self-doubt as well.
Yeah. I'm thinking about this conversation. I'm realizing that I'm like feeling really sad. I'm sad that this is a thing.
Mhm.
I'm sad that, and I think that I go about my daily activities like very much aware of this, especially about what I'm going to talk about next or what I'm going to go into next. But it's just sad that it has to be, that it's a thing even.
Yep.
So. So yeah, talking about adapting, like asking ourselves like why are we adapting? What do we change when we enter this space? For me, it is definitely like before I walk through the threshold, um I like to prepare myself in general and prepare my mind in general for the day and what's going to happen in the day, but I definitely am changing my tone, my body language, my level of expressiveness, and in our community we call it code switching, right? And there's a reason that we do this. It's not a weakness, it's a skill, and it helps us to develop responses to real patterns. So being mischaracterized, right? If I'm changing my tone, my body language, and my level of expressiveness, I am avoiding being mischaracterized. I am protecting my credibility in some spaces, which again, like this feels so disgusting that I even have to say this, and this is the truth, right? It also helps as others are navigating their biases. Um, and so I guess what I'm saying is understanding that there's a function to this, that it
Mhm.
isn't, again, it's not a weakness. There's a function to this. And instead of judging it, we can take time to understand it, or even just be conscious, have this in our awareness that maybe others are experiencing this. Maybe other people are right before they get through the threshold or changing their tone, their body language, and their level of expressiveness so that they aren't mischaracterized, they're, so that, yeah, they're protected in a system or in an environment where people are navigating their own biases. And so, I don't know. Again, sad that this is a conversation, and also this is where we're at.
So we're going to throw out a few experiments because this is a tough situation and um, experience to be navigating or to be experiencing. So here are some things you can try. Choose one moment to show up slightly less self-editing. So we're not saying like just throw all caution to the wind,
Yeah, don't
but
do that.
don't do that. But just choose one moment to just be yourself a little bit more. Share an idea without over rehearsing. So trust yourself a little bit more and let your natural tone come out just a little bit more. So, not all at once, not every single place, every interaction, but do it intentionally because development happens through small, repeated shifts and getting that data back every time you try it.
Yeah, and part of, as you're talking about that, part of what's going through my mind is it's so important that we allow ourselves to grow and develop in the ways that are absolutely appropriate in terms of like human development, and also to be cautious or strategic, as you said. And it's complex, and we have a right to develop and grow. So if you can do some of these things, right? Sharing without over rehearsing in like one space, or letting your natural tone come through maybe with one coworker, or one situation, to allow yourself the growth that is part of normal human development, that could be really, really satisfying, helpful, and developmentally appropriate. So after you've decided, what situations or what interactions are probably the safest to experiment with, assess the data. What did you learn? What actually happened? What did you expect to happen? What felt different? You might find that some fears don't play out, and maybe some environments are more flexible, or that some environments really reveal their limitations. And that clarity is really, really important because now you're not just adapting automatically, you're choosing. So there's a sense of empowerment that comes in being able to experiment and learn and making decisions based off of your own free will and not because a system dictates it.
Yeah. And depending on who you are, you may or may not need this, but I know that I would need to have some support in my corner, depending on how this goes. Whether it is with a therapist that I've kind of talked some of these things through and I'm going to do it, or a friend or a mentor, but just someone that I can like run the data through, that I can share that this is what I tried and this is the response I got. I tend to be highly emotional, and so it's really nice to have someone who isn't as emotional to be able to talk to about things and get their perspective. I would make sure that you're caring for yourself
Mhm.
as you are navigating these systems that we live in.
This is what growth looks like in real systems. It's not just be yourself, it's also understand the system, understand your adaptations, and choose how you show up with intention. Because the goal isn't to shrink to fit, it's to develop the capacity to define yourself, even when the space is still catching up.
Thanks everyone for listening. Remember to share this with a friend if you found it helpful. And as always, speak clearly and listen bravely.
When you feel confident in your communication, everything changes.
We'd love to hear your wins, failures, and insights on Instagram at Communication Skills for Women. Leave a review and connect with us.
Until next time, speak clearly and listen bravely.